Just so that everybody knows, we've got other people who I know are here, so I'm going to wait just a few minutes before we start. All right. Well, it's all right. I have to take notice of my boss over here. You see, that's the thing. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. First, a special thank you to the officers who've been involved for tonight, because I know it was unusual that we called a second one of these meetings as a follow-on. All I can say is there was so much interest the last time that we really needed to have some more time to talk about some of the issues. So thank you, officers. I just go through a couple of bits before we start. The standard routines. The meeting is being live streamed to the public. If any members of the public present, I don't know whether we have any, do we? No, not at the moment. That's fine. This, as I've said, is an additional meeting of the Crime and Disorder Committee, which is unusual. And this was what we agreed at the previous meeting on the 7th of March. We, as you know, as a committee, have a responsibility for the review and scrutiny of the decisions and actions taken by the Community Safety Partnership in connection with the discharge of its crime and order functions. In that sense, we're in line with the provisions of the Police and Justice Act 2006. I'm going to change the sequence a little bit this evening. So let's just pick it up. I think first, maybe do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we have received apologies from Councillor Ambia, Chair.
Thank you. There are no minutes which have gone out with this paper. All of the resources associated with anything to do with minutes of this meeting were, of course, taken up with activities mostly related to the PCC elections. I think I've done. Do I have any further announcements to worry about?
Yeah.
No? Okay. Any disclosures of interest, please?
None at this point.
Okay. Any urgent business?
No urgent business, Chair.
Any references from other committees and bodies?
There are no references, Chair.
Okay. Now, I would like to, we're very fortunate following the election not very long ago to have been able to get to join us this evening, John Tizard. John was elected as our new Police and Crime Commissioner for Bedfordshire. John, welcome very much to this meeting. We try to keep a very active and as close we can relationship with the police from here. And I think the closer that we can work together, the better, as far as I'm concerned. I will give John in a second the opportunity to just take up 15 minutes of our time just to give you a view, and you can ask questions of him. I'm then going to move on, if I may, and if the police are happy to do so, to take the police section of the meeting process this evening immediately after John has finished. Is that okay? Okay. Sorry? So it's now, according to my manager over here, that of course was item 8. But first of all, welcome to John Tizard. I hope you all will appreciate the fact that he's made the effort to come to us so quickly after the elections. So John, over to you.
Well, thank you, Chair. And can I say it's a great pleasure to be here. I can recall some very awkward county Labour group meetings in this council chamber some decades ago, but I won't reflect too much on those this evening. As you say, Chair, I had the privilege to be elected Police and Crime Commissioner for Bedfordshire just over 7, 8, 10 days ago, when Robin oversaw the election process and the count. So it is very early days. I only formally took up office on Thursday of last week. So it's day 4 in post. But for me, because I've had a local government background, and there are colleagues here I served on the former Bedfordshire County Council with, I had nearly over 18 years as a councillor in Bedfordshire. And for me, local government is absolutely the cornerstone of our democratic system, to represent local people, local communities, and hold to account all of us, whether we are elected or appointed as public officials. So although I will be held to account by the Police and Crime Panel, of which I know there are members in this room this evening, I want to be accessible to the 3 local authorities, and indeed to the parish and town councils. But clearly I can't on quite the same scale. It would be all my time will be taken up attending meetings across the county. So here, Central Bedfordshire and Bedford Borough. And I've made it very clear, and I made it very clear in my campaign and in my manifesto, that whilst my principal accountability must be ultimately to the electors of Bedfordshire, but through the Police and Crime Panel, I want to be open and accessible to scrutiny panels, full councils, or whatever other means of legitimate or illegitimate scrutiny you want to hold me to account for. Because I think the police on their own cannot work in isolation, and I'm sure Adrian will say that when he speaks. It has to be a partnership, and one of those principal partnerships is between the police and the local authorities, and the partnership with business, community groups, faith groups, and the residents and as well, because we all have a contribution to make to prevent crime, to address crime and reduce crime, and hold those who break the law to account. I much prefer to consider, it'd be great if we could do much more prevention and avoid people getting trapped into the system, particularly young people. I'm very aware of some of the issues in Luton, where young people getting drawn into knife crime and other heinous crimes, and actually ruining not only society, but ruining their own prospects as well, and how we can actually work much more closely to prevent. And I know when I read your agenda item on your community safety plan, that's very much part of that. So for me, the key issues are how can we improve and enhance community and neighbourhood policing? And again, I'm looking forward to the presentation this evening, because for me, that's not just about having more police officers or PCSOs on the streets, important as that is. It's not just about visibility on the streets, important as that is. It's actually about how, and I know talking to the Chief Constable and other senior officers in the Bedfordshire Police, they recognise this too. How do we create that partnership between the community and the police? How do we have the community feeding into the police and feeling confidence in them, having access to them, and having joint, advisory groups to identify the issues. For me, community policing is really important because it's a source of trust for the public. It's dealing with issues like antisocial behaviour, drug-related crime on the streets, but it's also about being intelligence for the wider issues in policing. But we can't take away from the fact we have some very serious crime. Serious crimes such as fraud and cybercrime, which is increasing in the county. Serious crimes such as violence. Only this weekend, there have been too many incidents of violence, including, sadly, violence against police officers in the county. But also how we address those issues and how we protect vulnerable groups. And I'm very conscious too of the impact of modern day slavery, trafficking, sexual exploitation, which again is rife across Bedfordshire and beyond. Let's not beat ourselves up and think Bedfordshire's and Luton especially is sadly everywhere. But we also know that it's particularly a big issue here in this borough. So we need to, again, be working, but the police can't do that on their own. And I certainly can't do it as Police and Crime Commissioner. It has to be a partnership approach. And part of the other part of my role is the crime bit. It's actually coordinating the wider local criminal justice system, the CPS, the probation service, the prison service, and all the other aspects that contribute to that. And that's going to be a very important part of the role. But above all, it's about accountability and transparency. I want to be accountable. I want to be transparent in what I do. I want people like yourself, the chair, and members in this room to hold me to account for that. And when I publish my police and crime plan, and I say my because the law says it's mine, I hope it's our police and crime plan in September for the ensuing few years, I want to be held to account for the delivery of that plan. And in turn, then I'll hold the Chief Constable and he'll hold the Chief Inspector and others to account for delivering that. So my message is I want to be very much part of the fabric of the democratic system here in Luton. I want to work with you. I want to work with the communities of Luton and the diverse communities of Luton, what a strength that is. And let's build on that. But above all, I want you to feel able to contact me if there are issues. So I can come to formal meetings, but let's have a dialogue in between those meetings and ensure that between us, we actually do the best for building the safety and the well-being of the people of Luton. And obviously, I have an interest in the people who live beyond Luton in the county as well. We're a small county. We ought to be able to work much more collaboratively than perhaps we do on occasion. So thank you very much for that invitation to say a few words. More than happy to take any questions, but I'm also conscious you've got a big agenda this evening, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I ask that at this point, from members of our board, our committee tonight, just for the moment, try and keep the questions which are related to the PCC for John for the moment, because we'll come on to some of the others as we move on to the police report. So have you any questions for our new Police and Crime Commissioner?
Yeah. First of all, welcome, Commissioner. I'm Dave Collins, and I'm the head of the Youth Partnership Service here in Luton, which clearly predominantly deals with statutory youth justice, but also anything to do with criminal exploitation and serious violence. And it's more of an ask than a question as such. It's before you write that crime plan, can we meet so I can talk to you about the partnership that's worked so well in Luton from the last 5 years? And that's not just about the work of my service, that's the partnership of all of our colleagues sitting around, including the police and health colleagues. So it's a bit of an ask really before the crime plan is written.
And in one word answer, yes. And I want to meet you. I want to meet as many people as I can and organisations and stakeholders. That's why I said our plan rather than my plan, because I could sit in an office in Kempston, or I could sit at home in Sheffield and think I can have all the answers. Maybe if I'm too egocentric, I may think I do. I don't. You have those answers. I need to know what's working, what isn't working, what can we do? And then there has to be a conversation, doesn't it? Because, I didn't talk about finance. Finance is very limited, as we know, and resources, and there are huge demands. But the kind of area you're working in must be a priority. But given I recognise some people in this room, I'm very surprised they're stunned into silence. I suspect there may be questions coming at a different time. So I'm not going to be lulled into a sense of false security, but I'm really pleased to have had the opportunity. I'm going to stay and listen to your meeting, and I'm sure I'll learn in that process. So thank you, Chair.
As it's going to be a direct link, I'd like us to move on to section 8 in the papers that you have, which is dealing with community policing in Luton, which you heard John saying is one of his priorities. Thank you, and welcome again to our meeting. It seems to be a regular thing for me now, meeting up with senior officers from the police.
And thank you, Chair. Thank you for the invite. For those who don't know me, with which there are a good few around the chambers, my name's Chief Inspector Adrian Cunningham. I'm part of Bedfordshire Police, been part of Bedfordshire Police for nearly 20 years now, before having transferred from Lincolnshire. I am at the behest of IT at the moment. It's going from here to Kempston to over there, so it may take some time on each button click. So we will hope that it works. First of all, resourcing. I've been asked to present on some very specific things this evening. And we will go back one because resourcing being the first. I know there were specific questions that came up at the last meeting. The resourcing picture within Bedfordshire and within Luton community at the moment is the healthiest it's been for a number of years. Healthiest, not healthy. We are substantive ranks of, we've got myself in post covering for Alex House at the moment. We've got both chief inspectors, and I've recruited the the inspector who's going to take over from Mike Hobbs, who's been absolutely fantastic in the last year. So we've already got the recruitment in place for that and the start date. And then for once, and once only, we've got more sergeants than we have posts, which is most unusual and something I'm very proud of, and also keeping very quiet of to the Chief Constable. PCs wise, we're doing very well from when we were below 50% probably at this time last year. It's showing us 6 positions short. Actually, that's going to be 2, and those 2 positions we've already interviewed for. We're just waiting for a decision on when their release date's going to be. So PCs wise, we're in a very healthy place, which is good because it enables us to put officers out onto the ground and also responding to incidents, which is what everybody wants throughout the process. The education and diversion officers, we've had an uplift in the last 6 months, and I'll come on to them more shortly. 80% filled, as I've already mentioned. The task we face is PCSO recruitment. And this is a different and difficult challenge that we're facing. Government funding enables a number of 20,000 police officers to be recruited. There was no such funding for PCSOs in Boris Johnson's gift pack to us. So what we're doing at the moment, we're actively trying to recruit. We're going out to fairs, we're going to recruiting fairs, we're engaging with the job centre. Everything possible we can do, we're going through that. We've got a number coming through the training process at the moment, and we've got a number which are identified in the next one. Honesty and transparency, that is going to leave us a shortfall. We are still going to be recruiting probably in 6 months' time, and that is one of the main drivers which we have as a force, and also within Luton. So I will open that one up straight away to say that is the position we're in. We are actively trying to get people through the doors and recruited, and the right types of people. We've got a whole media campaign which has been allocated to it. Resources also, we've got our inspection, our HMIC inspection, which is coming up at the end of the year. That has, whilst nobody likes an inspection, I certainly don't, and we're only 5 months away from it, what it does do is enables us to take a fresh look, particularly with myself taking in post, of where we are, particularly to do with resources, the allocation and what we're doing to the best capability with those resources. At the moment, I've been doing a SWOT analysis on it, and what we have done is we've realised that some of the PCSOs have been doing jobs which have been, there's been double recording and there's been over paperwork, too much paperwork involved. We basically said, get the information onto the system, we'll do it once and once only, and then we get back out onto the street. So we're doing a systems analysis on that. Cohesion team, hopefully you should have met the cohesion team. We've got a sergeant +3 at the moment. They are intrinsically involved in nearly everything that goes on within Bedfordshire Police in one form or another, even though they're just one sergeant and 3, Phil Boyd and his 3 staff. They've been involved in parades, protests, liaison, crime investigation, which isn't usually in their remit, community events. They're involved in nearly every community event that we have going where we can. You see them on Luton Carnival, but also the smaller events. Reassurance patrols, when we've had recent events of note, they've been out doing reassurance patrol and actually leading those patrols from the younger in service police officers, which we have on patrol and have on community policing. They've been out leading them, taking them around the communities, doing introductions and assisting in that way. And they're also involved in the national landscape. There used to be a phrase when I came to Bedfordshire that all roads lead to Luton. I think a lot of roads now lead away from Luton, with us disseminating our knowledge and capability to other boroughs and other counties within the country. And I will say that's certainly been happening recently. The number of requests where we get coming in saying, what do we within Bedfordshire or within Luton do about this particular problem? Sometimes we hold up our hands and go, I don't know, I'm busy trying to work it out myself. But sometimes we're able to offer advice. Schools and colleges, one of the most important aspects of the cohesion team. They get into the schools, they act as a positive influence, they act as that sort of, police aren't there to punish, they're there to help. And that is the primary line. Phil, who's an author, who's the sergeant, has a phrase that he wants to read to a school every single day. And if he could, and if I let him, if I wasn't directing him to do other things, he would. And that's one way that he is involved in engagement with our young people. And as I said, it's recognised throughout the country and the county and nationally. What I plan to do is I'm just going to split it up into the various areas of the Luton that we have at the moment. So I'll cover Luton South and East first. And I'll cover it in 3 different areas. And I'll do this for all the different sections. So cover the past, what we're doing at the current time, and my plans for the future. And I use the term my plans for the future. That's the team's plans. Because actually, I will say, since being in the job for 6 weeks, I found out my job's relatively easy because they are so good. By the time I said to one of my sergeants, can you do this? Or have you done this? Boss, that was done 2 weeks ago. So they are very good. So it's a team, very much a team approach. So Luton South and East, the things we've been doing in the recent past, nuisance motorcycles in Stopsley and Wigmore, metallic, targeted patrols, number of bikes seized, very active out there. Nuisance motorcycles and go-peds and that like are a blight within the county at the moment as a whole. That is widely recognised, and there are a number of positive operations which have been ongoing and are ongoing at the moment, and that's throughout the county. There's one going on in Houghton Regis in the very near future, started yesterday, hopefully. And that has a read across to Bedfordshire. So please don't think that Central are getting all of our resources. They're not. There's a read across because of how the 2 and the 3 CSPs work so closely together. Noise abatement work. We worked with LBC recently on a warrant turned up to a noise complaint. And from that noise complaint, we recovered a viable firearm, one that was actually being manufactured to go out into the communities and cause harm. That, in its own, shows the benefits of the joint working between Tony's team and the community team. And we do those on a number of times every month. Current work that's going on, Castle and Stewart Street, Operaana, tackling the begging issue that there is. This is positive engagement with those who are begging, but also positive work that if the engagement doesn't work with them, then there are avenues open to us where we can take other actions. Some of that has resulted in a closure notice at Unity House, which was very, very well known for drugs and antisocial behaviour. And also positive action where some of the individuals concerned who weren't willing to engage with us and the community teams from the net have been issued CBOs, and in some cases they have been given the opportunity to rehouse. Environmental action days, cleaning up, going around identifying areas where crime has happened and what can be done around those. And that's around all, and walkarounds with ward councillors. I know that certainly some of the councillors recently have been out with my teams, and it's, excuse me, I think that's so beneficial. I hope it's an eye-opener for the councillors. I know, so you've been on one. It's also an eye-opener for my police officers and my PCSOs and those who work alongside us to actually get some of the feedback from the people who are going around with us as to what's happening. Future, Radio 1 big weekend. When I heard about this, my heart sank. I'm actually the Bronze Commander, the Public Order, Public Safety Bronze Commander for it. It's fantastic. I cannot say how my view has changed in the recent months about what this will bring to the town, and the plans that have been put together from both ourselves, council, through the event organisers, through the locality, etc. I'm sure there will be a question or two afterwards about it, but that is on the horizon. Less than a week and a half to go. Targeting of serious youth violence activity within the South and East, that continues. I will come on to that slightly in a bit. That's one of the overarching themes of all the presentation. And knife sweeps. Once again, one of those activities which we don't advertise very well, or as we certainly didn't, we will be in future, but simply targeting an area, going through an area with some of the safety teams, and just doing a check into bushes and quite literally putting hands into bushes as far as the wrist and coming out with a zombie knife that, as long as your arm, takes another knife off the street and reduces that risk of harm by so much. And those sweeps are very effective, and is one of the other ones that works within the teams. Luton Central, past of Octons, the exploitation up there which happens. Recent work and presentations have gone up, and the feelings from the local residents has been that there's been significant improvement in recent months. Op Helmet in the town centre, as correction, within Bury Park, was the response, the joint response from all agencies to a violent disorder involving a knife during the period of Ramadan. It wasn't a one-off, one night. I think quite a few of us on the officers' side spent a good number of days and nights working through this, and the response to it was extremely positive from the community. From the local mosques, it's some of the most positive response I've had. and we've been able to access information which we'd never had before, in a positive sharing capability, but also the fact that there was no further incidents throughout the period of Ramadan and leading into Eid, and certainly not the repetition of what happened 2 years ago with the violent disorder there. Support to Eid Op Chand, which went on, we were able to put minimal resources on it because of engagements, but also are very visible. And then we've gone into days of enforcement for high harm offenders, those offenders that cause us the most harm, the most times within the community. Currently, we're looking at engagements with further engagements within Hightown, supporting those who need our support there, and also being positive and relentless in the furtherance of the offenders. Of future, drugs, begging and pickpocketing all around the town centre and the outskirts of the town centre, the areas which aren't covered by other operations. And that's resulted in 3 closure orders. That's 3 addresses which are no longer able to be used as drug dens for vulnerable people to go and to be taken advantage of. The advantage of that is also we're able to engage with those people who have been using those addresses and have been the subject of crimes in order to try and help them. And that's using charities as well. And we're identifying offenders with actions. In Central, Opselis, which is an overarching, directed, targeted, intelligence-led operation into reducing serious violence, drugs, and antisocial behaviour. And then we're also going into colleges. This week is OPSEPTA, which is the national operation against knife crime. We're going into a number of schools and colleges, setting up stands, being there during lunchtime, handing out leaflets, but also engaging with students during that period. And that is not about just saying how damaging carrying a knife can be and the repercussions, but also offering support to those people who need it, those young people who need it and who want it, and also teachers, guardians and parents. Luton North and East passed. Environmental days of action, particularly up in the Lucy Farm area. Walkarounds by councillors. Opposite up Belleville, shoplifting. This is an operation which is county-wide now, where it was recognised that those who often shoplift and cause high-value theft, not just one item, but hundreds of items at once, are often vulnerable. And so we approach them, we deal with them in the manner which is appropriate to the level of theft, offering the support. But if that is not taken up, then we also have the opportunities for enforcement, and a number of community banning orders have been issued on the back of those. But support is the primary, the first option. Once for drugs, a number have been carried out. Our plan for the near future and going into the future is how we actually advertise that to yourselves and to your residents, so you know what's being going on, so you know that the intelligence which is being provided, which I know is a concern to a lot of people, is being actioned. You may not just see it immediately. It sometimes takes days, weeks, and occasions months, depending on the level of crime that's involved, in order for us to get the maximum resolution to that, instead of just looking at a quick hit with maybe a prosecution for a bit of possession, to a bigger hit with larger sentences for the main people who are involved. Present, Marsh Farm, high visibility patrols, particularly down alleyways, which has been recognised as a vulnerable point for on-street robberies and drug dealing. Amarello, cops on bikes, not my phrase, that one, but it is just that. And I use it because it is just that. It's officers on bikes able to respond quickly to incidents that happen. Serious youth violence disruption activity around school end times, having visible patrols around schools so that at the end of school, young people are safe to go home, their parents are safe to go and collect them, carers are safe to go and collect them, and that transition from the safety of the school to the safety one hopes of the home environment, that transition is enabled. We've had a number of operations and visible patrols around there, and it's something, having been involved, I was previously around the control room in the incidents, being the Oscar 1, the controller for the incidents which happened over the last few months in schools, 12 months, the last 12 months. It's a passion of mine so we can make that transition a safe one, from safety to safety, and the encouragement. This all goes hand in hand with the knife work that we're doing. In the future, Intel-led restrictions on street drug trade. If I can, I will leave it at that, not wanting to preempt anything, and also very conscious that this is live streamed. Community engagement and engagement with serious youth violence, and also car park events. That's twofold car park events, and I've deliberately put that on there. That's nuisance cars in car parks, of which we get a lot of complaints, but also that's us turning up with our stands, enabling interactions with vehicle users to put on number plates that can't be stolen, or they can be stolen, but they're snapped in half because they've got special screws, and safety advice around vehicles. Because if we can negate some of the vehicle crime and the false number plate crime, then we're part of the way there to negating some very, very serious organised crime groups using those cloned plates. Town centre, I know this was gone into a lot of detail in the last meeting. I'm not going to skirt over it because it is very important to us. But what I will mention, Ob Metal is continuing. That's developed into Op Mercury Blade, which I've got responsibility for now. That is pulse patrols around the town centre, particularly identified hotspots where we're taking on action. Begging initiatives, as I've already mentioned. Presence Observator is no secret. It's a intelligence-led operation where we have both uniformed and plainclothes officers who are specially trained to identify people who are behaving in a way that wouldn't be natural to the environment they're in. So that's not only counter-terrorism, but that which happens up at the airport, but that is also criminal-led within the town centre and also within other areas around the county, which we're doing it. Mercury Blades is the serious youth violence, knife and intel-led operation. Op Toys, we've seen a spike recently, or we saw a spike for a month in February, March of personal robberies within the town centre leading over into the central area. That spike has now dropped off, but we've had very high visibility patrols, but also an investigative immediate response asset which has been put on the ground. So that is continuing and will continue for a while until I'm happy that that has dropped off. Nighttime economy continuing, warm weather, more people going out for longer, often into the early hours of the morning after the sun has come up. So that is an expanded one, but certainly one which we work with the council a lot on, James and Tony. Future, got the carnival coming up a week on Monday. Optai, as I mentioned, which I'm really looking forward to. It should be very good. And also the Knife Angel coming, and we're putting out requests for ideas of what we can do with the Knife Angel. For anybody who doesn't know, a Knife Angel is a superb piece of art which has been put together with knives that have been seized from the street and from offenders. Is very, very impactful and on first glance absolutely horrifying, but it is one of those things which brings home the knowledge around it. Engagement, once again, it may seem that it's been very much police, we're doing this, and council, we're doing this with, but what we're looking to do is we're striving to develop that public confidence and being more vocal about what we're doing in the joint environment. I think there's so many good meetings which have happened and do happen. We just don't advertise it. And we don't let one another know about the good work that's going on. And that's mostly where some of the questions have come from in the past and come into my office all the time is, what are you doing about it? Well, actually, in the last week, we have done this, this, and this. So we're developing an engagement plan, which I'm working on with our community team, so that information will get out. We are now going live with a thing called Beds Connected, which is a IT platform where members of the public can register, and you will get, once you've registered for your area, an email, or however you want to be contacted, target messages on surgeries, what's happening, new crime figures through police.uk, any major incident messages, very important in my other line on my public order, public safety. So if something happens, we can get an immediate message out. Please stay away from this area because we've had an oil spill or a petrol spill, or there's an incident ongoing, or there's a fire ongoing. So we're linked in with fire on that side as well. And also outcomes and results. We're looking at surveys, and this can be as simple as how do you want to be contacted? Do you want town hall meetings or parish council meetings, or do you want to do it online? So it's a very, very simple way of engaging with people in a very quick way. And all it takes is one contact. We went live with it internally, like I say, very recently, and it goes live to the general public on the 20th of May. On the test run we had, we got over 2,000 members within a 7-day period. Completely new way of thinking. It will be tried, it will be tested, and then we'll come back to see how it's going. And I will report on it in future meetings. And it's one of these which is not only about the communication, but about building the confidence and council engagements. For me, the importance of it can't be underestimated, because I need to get some of the joint working out to the general public and the residents so it's understood what is going on. Let's Talk Water meetings. Chair, I believe you were at one last week, and it went very well, but we're going through the whole cycle again, and you should see within your areas ones coming up. This is, I put on the unsighted work because that's what I feel it is, in that some of the stuff which happens, we have a lot of positive work which goes on, but we either can't say about it, or it's just very bespoke and very task driven. So the education system, by the education and diversion team, we've got 5 officers who go into schools and they just speak to the young people, speak to the teachers, and speak to the parents when they need to. During Off Helmet, they visited, over the space of 3 days, they visit, I think it was 20 educational establishments, revisiting some of them 2 or 3 times during different times of the day, so they could engage with different people and different groups and different dynamics. So some were doing sports, some were doing lessons, some were during lunch times. Such a fantastic response, and some of the feedback that we got from that, some of the diversionary work that went in from that alone helped 3 young people hopefully divert away from it. We have a rural team which have specialist equipment, including drones, four-wheel drive farmers type vehicles and things. Whilst that describes us in the rural, we use them within the Luton County boundaries as well, because we do have the open spaces that we need to cover and we can cover in very quick times. Organised crime groups and gang disruption. It is the covert world which we do. and a phenomenal amount of work is going on in the background, which we only ever see the tip of the iceberg coming through with the arrests and disruptions there. And one thing which I'd like to highlight, and I know this has, I don't know if it has been highlighted in the past, just so your councillors are aware, once a week, LBC and various officers and my team, plus other interested agencies, meet on a Monday morning for a thing called we've called burning issues. So we can look at what's just happened in the last week, what can we do about what's happened, and focus our attention on that, and what's coming up in the very near future. That's the burning issues. And we've had, fortunately, we haven't had that many things which have come up, but those things that have come up, we've been able to thrash out and use a joint approach, as opposed to police doing it from over there, council doing it from over here, education doing it from over there. We've been able to bring it together, and youth services as well. And Dave knows my opinion on the meeting, and I'm very, very pleased with the way that's going. And there's also the contextual safeguard meetings to do with both groups and individuals. Weapon sweeps mentioned, community meetings as already mentioned. And I will just highlight the force work. And I can give some answers, but not all, on statistics and things. And I also wanted to give some reassurance to the audience. You will have seen in recent press that our force control room was counted as bottom in the country for their response to 999 calls. We're now 4th in the country for response to 999 calls. And that is the turnaround that the focused effort and things can bring. So I just wanted to highlight that, because I know some of the community confidence, when they see those negative headlines, that's the type of thing which we're starting to push out now to give the community confidence back in the work that's been going on. That's call handling. And then major investigations, you will have seen some of the ones, I hope, that have been through the papers and the media in recent months, with some of the significant, and these are significant, jail sentences which have been given out to high harm offenders. Public order, public safety, which is my other world, is the response to protests and the response to things which may go on. This isn't just about sending police with riot gear in to deal with things. This is about somebody just having a conversation with somebody, saying, you're going to have a protest, can we engage with you early on? And we do. And therefore, because we know what's happening, we don't need to send any police at all. And it is a right to protest. And we do that with a number of different organisations. And that is our graduated approach. And that has been happening a lot. So I feel as if I've talked for rather a long time. I haven't had my glass of water. So, Chair, over to yourself, and I'll sit down now. I'll take any questions if that's okay with yourself.
Please do. Yeah, thank you. I just before I go into questions, just speaking personally, I think that what I've heard tonight as a report is much more at the level that I was hoping to get. I think it's been an excellent report, and I'd like to say thank you. However, that is not to say that necessarily all of my committee members won't have some searching questions. Councillor Franks, you can start.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed. Yes, thank you, Chief Inspector, for the report. I agree with Pierre's remarks. It really was extremely useful. Just 3 things I want to say. First of all, the 3 councillors for the Barnfield and Bushmead area, of which I am one, have in the past worked very closely and very successfully with our local policing team. Currently, we don't even know their names. We know people move on, we know things have to change, but when I need to contact these days, I have to email Inspector Nassar, and good old Nas always gets me a response, and gets a response usually quite quickly. But why don't I know the names of the constables and PCSOs who are supposed to be looking after my area? We worked very closely with them when we knew who they were. I find it very difficult to work closely with people and I don't even know their names. The second point I want to make is not unique in the country, I'm sure, but quite unusual. My ward has got 2 further education colleges. That gives rise to a number of issues. Many of them are actually issues the council should be dealing with and not the police, things like litter. But there are police issues, and it would be good, again, if we could work more closely with our local police team to understand what they're doing. And in fact, quite often we can give them information that they might not otherwise have available to them, and that could be helpful to them. Last thing I want to say is thank you for Bedfordshire Connected. It's a major advance forward. I find it personally very useful, very helpful, and long may it continue.
Certainly. As for the names, completely take your point, sir. And they are available on police.uk. However, that doesn't negate the need for contact through yourselves. I'll feed that back to Inspector Nazar and the team as a whole. It's something that we need to do to increase that confidence through engagement, which I mentioned. So I completely take that one on board. The 2 further educational establishments, there is a considerable amount of work being done by the education and diversion team within the establishments. What I will do, I'll check with them and maybe come up with a plan of how we can advertise what has been happened. What I'm very keen not to do is to alienate them and their work to an extent. So I'll certainly have a think and take that one away and work with my partners about what's going on there. I don't know, may want to say something afterwards. And Beds Connected, thank you very much.
Yes, Councillor.
I just have a follow-up question from David Franks. When you're talking about the team that go into the schools and colleges, is there any way we can find out or have some literature or something that says what schools are being targeted, what schools have been visited, the number of times those visits have taken place?
Those are certainly some figures which I'll be able to get hold of, yes. I'll, if I may, I'll report that to the next meeting, or I'll make sure on the circuit of Let's Talk meetings, those figures are available once I've managed to get hold of them and I've checked their validity.
If there is any follow-up emails that you feel that you're able to give, then if you can put them through via Eunice here, she will make sure that all the panel members have got it. Yes.
Hi, just 2 very quick ones for me. Operation Octurnes, how are you measuring outcomes and success? And secondly, you mentioned begging quite a bit. I mean, the people who are most likely to beg, what I'm worried about is they end up being criminalised, and that's not a solution, because a lot of the people on the streets are vulnerable people with complex needs, domestic abuse victims. We're going to ensure that they're not just being criminalised and the underlying issues are being dealt with.
Yes, sorry, I missed the first question. Was that Op Octurnes?
Yeah, just how you're measuring outcomes and success.
Op Octurnes, the engagement phase at the moment is it's just finished its first phase and moving into the second. The reporting side of it, we're busy trying to work out an appropriate way of doing it. Primarily, my focus is in the prosecution of those people who are taking advantage of those who are working within Hightown. That is my focus, but we've got the qualitative of how people feel, residents, and the feelings have been very good coming back, but also the quantitative of number of arrests, number of prosecutions, number of knives taken off the street, number of warning letters that are being given, and there's a number of things coming up in the very near future. And sorry, the second one was.
Criminalisation of begging and making sure that we're not begging, criminalising vulnerable people.
I hope I covered that in the presentation. Prosecution isn't the first option. It's engagement, trying to assist, finding out why. And there's a lot of work with the community, with the net teams, and with various agencies that are going on.
Councillor Stevens, and then over here.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chief Inspector. Very useful, very informative, I'd like to say. I did indeed go out on 2 high visibility days with your team, Sergeant Saqib Khan, and some of the PCOs. So I get on very well with Eleanor Scott, one of the PCOs, does a very good job. One of the things I learned about going out with the team was that we can identify issues, and sometimes there's not a joined up writing from our side at the council from the things that we've identified. So, for example, in Stockwood Crescent, Saqib and I identified the fact that they were using driveways to go behind some of the blocks at night time to do their drug dealing.
Yep.
And it was, I think we put forward the view, and I think my colleague actually has picked it up, that we need to have barriers to actually stop that happening. I don't think that's happened so far. So in some ways, when we identify these things, perhaps there should be more liaison going after the event with officers, councillors, and with the police to make sure that we put some urgency into that situation. And I think that would be a good outcome if it could happen. The other thing I want to say specifically about Southwood, if I may, is that one of the issues that come up in every part of the ward, whether it be from Park Street to Stockwood Park, Stockwood Crescent, to Ashton Road, to Hibbert Street, every part of the ward, it's the drug issue. And it's been highlighted by old people as well as younger people. I know we're going to talk about drugs later on. When I did the second high visibility visit, which was around the Parktown estate and Manor Park, one of the things that when I was talking to the PCO team, was they said, look, they're on duty till midnight. A lot of what happens is after midnight. So I think that's something that we need to look at. You know where the drug problems are. Yeah. I know that you do. I'm not sure we're doing enough to really highlight and intervene. Okay, we're going to talk about the other aspects of drugs later on and what we can try to do on the remedial actions. But we need to do more to enable the residents to feel that they're safe.
Yeah,
and that isn't happening. So whilst the high visibility action days are very good, and it does send out a signal, what the residents are saying, there is no general visibility around the ward by the police. We might see some police cars whizzing around sometimes. That's not good enough. There needs to be more police out on the roads providing that reassurance. And I'm not sure how you would be able to to come up with that, because I know that your resources are scarce, but we do need to try to do something about that. And then lastly, and it's nothing to do with Southwood, but it's to do with the town centre. I put a motion that went to full council about the speeding bikes, this e-bikes, scooters that are going through the town, which went through with full support of the council, minor amendment that came from the Labour side. And I think we had something that came back from one of your colleagues as to what the police are going to do about it. It was something like apprehend and something else, and then to remove the bike. So I'd like to know when that's going to happen. I know there's a bit that's incumbent on us to do, which is to put up the guided route that the bikes can follow. But we do need to implement that, because what is being said to me by especially the elder residents in my ward is that they don't feel safe coming into the town. They don't feel safe because of what they see as begging, which you've identified. People not necessarily doing anything wrong but hanging around, but especially about the speeding bikes that are going through, especially if they have some disability. You know, you can imagine that they're walking down the road and suddenly a bike whizzes past. What happens if they step out of the way and get hit? So we do need to tackle that. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, sir.
Excellent, thank you. And three very good points there. The feedback process, lessons identified is something which I drive anyway. I can't answer on that particular instance because I don't know is the honest answer, and I will not lie. So I can't give you an answer to that. The visibility of the patrols, that is a constant problem we face in trying to do it. Now that we've got the slight uplift or the nearly full establishment of officers and PCSOs, I hope that will increase. I cannot promise that that's going to happen, especially the midnight when the shift ends, because we're demand driven. We do a very busy demand graph about when officers should be on duty, but that's something which I'd hope to do in all wards. It's going back to basics of policing. Give me 100 extra cops, I can guarantee that would happen. Unfortunately, now that I've got the PCC here, one might hope that I get the 100 extra. But it's a demand-driven activity. And the bikes, are you talking about motorcycles, pedal cycles, or go-peds, or all of the above? Yeah.
These are the prime parts of the day. It's fairly clear. As I walked down from my house today, there was lots of traffic.
Yeah. That is a national problem that's been approached by the College of Policing as to the advice and what's going to happen legislatively in the next sitting of Parliament. In the meantime, though, there have been a number of operations which have been done in various wards, and I'm not sure what the forecast is for operations within the town centre or the outskirts of the town centre. So once again, I'm afraid I can't answer that one, but I will endeavour to find out with the various teams. It is something which is throughout the county and throughout the country.
Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Adrian. I thought your presentation was really good, and there's a lot of detail and there's a lot of good work you're doing there. And I'm pleased you're going out and communicating this, because a lot of what the public feel out there is about perception, and they believe, the police aren't doing anything. There's a lot of lawlessness in Luton, and I think some of that is due to the sort of, you're focusing a lot on the big high ticket items, but the low level antisocial behaviour. And I'm talking about the latest craze in Luton, where people decide they can park their car fully on the pavement. And we've had lots of residents say, well, why are you not doing anything? Why is the police not doing anything? You've got car crime as well, which is hitting people, burglaries, which is something they face. And when they don't see a good response, or they don't see a conviction rate or anything like that, that drains the confidence in the police. So I think there's a thing to be done there about tackling some of those low-level antisocial behaviour, even things like fireworks. We're coming into the summer, we'll probably have a whole load of weddings, and people will be letting fireworks off at about 1 a.m. And again, a lot of the residents say, well, what are you doing about it? What's the police doing about it? What's the council doing about it? So it's trying to do something about that low level. And I fully understand you haven't got the resources that you fully want, but if we could do something, even if it's a one-off, go around the town, anybody parking on the pavement gets a ticket, because that issue, I think there's a crossover. Who's really responsible? Is it the council or is it the police? I think we need to sort some of that out as well.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll cover what I can cover, and then I'm going to look slightly to my right. Police responsibilities, police legislation, which we can use, is quite often not what the public perception is of it. So I'll cover burglaries and car thefts first off. Last week and the week before, there was a targeted operation on particularly car key thefts of motor vehicles. We gave out a lot of the Faraday pouches. so that people can put them away and keep their car keys safe and vehicles safe. Likewise, there's been a lot of information going out about safety around that. It's not a new development, but it's a development which we're catching up on and already know what the next stage of the car development will be, and we need to try and get on top of that. Burglaries has always been a priority throughout the county. We have a specific team, Operation Maze, which are dedicated resources to the investigation of burglaries within the county, and they have one of the highest clear-up rates for high offender burglars, certainly within the county, and a good proportion within the country. Car parking and fireworks. There is legislation about fireworks, and certain times when you can do fireworks and certain times when you can't. Having worked as Oscar 1, which I can say I have, there are times when I have to balance the resources that we have against threat, harm, risk, and those responses that need to be immediate responses because somebody's life is in danger, and balance that against fireworks, which pose a threat of harm to anybody who's on the receiving end of it, because they do hurt, but also the disruption it causes to neighbourhoods and the bad feeling it causes, and also the level of antisocial behaviour it causes. So that fireworks is a joint piece of work which we do with the net and the enforcement teams, and that is not purely a police one, and that's something we work in conjunction with around that. And car parking, I am going to look to my right and say that it is something, unless it's in a dangerous position or causing an obstruction, then our powers are very limited, and there are reporting lines to go through both the police and the council services. We are conscious of it though, and there have been a number of operations recently in particular areas. I'll hand it open to Tony or anybody who wants to give him more information.
Yeah, hi Chair, Tony Stefano. I'm happy to talk a bit further on pavement parking if you really want me to. I probably will end up repeating probably a lot of what I've said previously. It's up to you whether you want to use the time for me to do that or not.
Do you wish to pursue that one specifically?
I think to save the committee some, we can maybe just talk about it, but it is becoming a craze where the whole car is actually on the pavement, blocking the pavement, and nobody can get by, and you have to go into the road.
And that is the difficulty when you have a car on the pavement and there are no other parking restrictions that are present, and that is the challenge for us from an enforcement point of view. And where it becomes a potential obstruction issue for which my colleagues would need to consider using their powers.
Chief Executive wants to.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think as we've talked about in this chamber, it'd be really positive if the government gave local authorities up and down the country the same powers as local authorities in London have got to tackle the scourge of pavement parking. Thanks, Chair.
I'm going to pull this section, if I may, to a halt because we need to move forward to the other main item today. But I'd like to say again, thank you very much indeed. I personally feel that the level that we've been talking today is much more in line with what I was hoping to get. So thank you very much indeed for the time and the effort, and thank you for coming to join us this evening. Okay, we now move on. Marek, you're basically in charge of this thing. All I was going to say is that when at our previous meeting, we seemed to have parts of the more detailed elements that sit within your report that didn't really get aired completely. I don't know how you want to play. Maybe you could advise.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. Thank you very much, and thank you to members for the opportunity to come back with the latest version or the draft of our CSP plan, but also in light of the previous conversation. I think we had a very in-depth dialogue last time in March, and explained that we were coming with an early draft as we wanted to engage with Scrutiny, with the Scrutiny panel and members on the development of that draft. Also, that we were developing it in line with the elections, and we now have a new PCC in post, and I'm glad to say that our portfolio Councillor Maria from the council has reached out already to the office and suggested a meeting to discuss the plan and Luton's priorities and the themes that we're working on. So, you know, that's going to be ongoing. And you talked about the plan, the future policing plan that you will be producing. So we want to make sure that aligns, and this conversation is all part of that. In terms of the what's before members, I'm not going to go into any detail. We did that last time. Just to say, we have in the room theme leads, or those who, if they're not here, there are others who may be able to answer for them if there are particular questions. But I think from my recollection, Chair, there were a number of sort of points that the panel didn't get time to explore. Some of them have been covered off really very well in the previous conversation around trust in policing and the community resources that are available, and a local policing presence. Others were around the engagement of young people in the process and ensuring that they are listened to and involved, and also an exploration of the challenges around drugs in the town, and how the CSP plan was going to be focusing on that. But there may be other points that members on reflection and having looked at the papers again want to raise. So I don't want to preempt the discussion. I think it's really now for us to open up and continue that dialogue, if that's okay.
Can I ask if we have any committee member who has got an area that he or she would like to focus on to begin with, and then if we can collectively combine just into that one area, and then we'll move on to another. So is anybody wishing to start me off?
Why don't we go through the topics one by one as they're coming
I'm sorry?
up? Why don't we go through the topics one by one as they're coming up, and just take the questions.
In which case, where are you starting, Councillor?
Presumably page 19, which is violence and exploitation.
Right, so 19, violence and exploitation. Okay, how and when do you want, what do you want to start with that?
I just wanted to come back to the point that I raised last time and wonder whether we've done any further follow-up to look at the practice that's happened in Glasgow. As I mentioned before, and I think you agreed with it, being treated much more as a social issue, as a health issue. But when I went further into it, I realised it wasn't just that. They were doing a lot more stop and search. And they were also going for much stiffer sentences for knife carrying, and I think that's led to a dramatic reduction in Glasgow. And I think it's something which I'm hoping that was being picked up, that we were going to look into to see if we could adapt any of that into our policy for the area of knife crime.
If I can take the last item first about sentencing. That is at the behest of the Crown Prosecution Service. That sounds like an offload onto them. We do the investigation, develop the file. We then hand it to CPS with our recommendations and our requests, aggravating factors, etc. At that point, unfortunately or fortunately, it then goes to them. That is a national issue. Knife crime and knife sentencing have their own bespoke things around them, around they must be charged as opposed to conditional cautions being given, etc. So the facilities are there, but unfortunately, in times we do our part in putting them before CPS. It's then CPS to decide what the chances of a realistic chance of a prosecution are. And it's about evidence gathering and us working once again in partnership with them in order to develop that. The Glasgow Health side, I'm not qualified to answer, unfortunately. The positivity on stop search, we have a stop search scrutiny panel, which we do with various partners and members of the community, which has very, very positive impacts. Once again, though, that comes down to legislation and the recent changes in legislation which have come in through the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, which affects England and Wales and Northern Ireland in parts, but not Scotland. They have their own legislation around stop search, which, to my recollection, and I can't say I'm a subject matter expert on it, is not as specific as ours having taken learning from various incidents around the country and community feedback about the use of stop search nationally. I hope hopefully that answers your question, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in and respond to Councillor Stevens. We have discussed the use of stop and search, increased stop and search at the Beds Police Crime Panel. And I think off the top of my head, I haven't got the figures in front of me. I think they were saying they disproportionately affect black and ethnic minorities. I think in Bedfordshire, you're 3 times more likely to be stopped and searched if you're a black and ethnic minority person. So I think we need to be careful in saying we need more, particularly if it's being disproportionately used against ethnic minority people.
I think Dave and I'll just do a little double act, just coming in on the public health approach to knife crime. That was the point that was mentioned as well. And I did respond to this in the last meeting, but just to say, although we haven't sort of badged the approach to knife crime as a public health approach as they did in Glasgow, it is a very similar thinking that we are taking here around developing the evidence base, looking at prevention, thinking about partnership actions. So I'll just hand over to Dave if he wants to come in more, but just to reassure that it is that kind of thinking that we're taking.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And, you know, a lot's been said about the Glasgow model, but when you look at the resources that were put into that, you know, and then know the higher deaths through drug use in Glasgow, you'll see where that kind of money was apportioned. The model you're talking about is you're talking about the intervention at primary, secondary, tertiary level, but also that kind of evidence base and the engagement with the community, the awareness, which is all features of all of this partnerships plans. When you look at it, you know, you look at something as simple, or not simple, sorry, you look at something like Dallow Cares and look at the evidence base behind that, look at the process of that, look at the engagement, look at the interventions. That's based on that model as well. And just to finalise the point on that, the serious violence duty that this CSP has, and you know, a lot of our organisations, is based around that model. So it's there. Just one last point. Just we've been talking about young people being disproportionately represented within a kind of offending and being drawn into criminal exploitation. Just adding to what that councillor just said there, things like mandatory sentence disproportionately affect young people. You know, young people who pick up a knife, you know, is it better to spend the money to divert them away from the criminal justice system, or should we just put them in prison for 4 months and then that whole cycle starts? And then when they become adults, they become that cost of late intervention that we see at Unity House.
Thank you. If I could just add one last thing. So the police are currently using the model that's described in here, the clear, hold, build model. And I'm actually going with Tom Steen, the Chief Inspector, on Wednesday to a conference when we're going to be talking about Dallow Cares, which is something that was delivered and is being delivered in the future as well in Luton, in the Dallow area. I'm going to be responsible for the knife crime action plan that came about as part of the knife crime agenda that was launched at the end of last year, following the tragic death of a young person in Luton. We had a follow-up knife crime meeting as well in March this year, for which I just sent out some information today, and people have been contacting me. So people in Luton really want to get involved from all different areas, not just the police. We've got the voluntary community, social enterprise and faith sector as well. So all the different departments will be contributing to this action plan, and I'll be coordinating it to make sure that we are effectively dealing with knife crime in Luton.
Just a final point to yours, Councillor Stevens, around stop and search. So that is an area of work that we have looked at with our voluntary sector and community partners, working particularly with young people directly in the borough. And I think as colleagues have touched on, there are a number of issues around it, both locally and nationally, which you're aware of in terms of disproportionality, but also particularly how it's conducted and the levels of trust within which that takes place. And I think the work that we've done has shown that the potential for dialogue between young people in the town and the police is there. There's plenty of space to fill, if you like, around that. And some of our partners that we've been working with have been able to take that conversation into schools and also into police training, and offer insights from both sides, if you like, to try to bridge the gap and understand why this is a necessary method of detection, but one that needs to be done in the right way and advised through the insight and lived experience of young people in the town. So that's some pilot work that we've done. It was funded by the Veru. We've got an evaluation report that's just come out with U-Turn Futures, Attentive Social Enterprise and Mary Seacole Housing Trust, and it's been a very powerful piece of work about lived experience in the town, which we want to take forward with our police colleagues to address and address in educational contexts as well with young people.
Service. I have to say that in my recent Let's Talk meeting, we had representatives from the partnership group that David heads, and went down extremely well with our group. So perhaps we can pick that one up. Who would like to start questions in respect of youth partnership and its work?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things, I didn't know about this, but it's been brought to the attention of a few councils that, for example, with ACE, they've had their budgets cut, massively. And young people who are in PRUs and out of formal education, because they've been excluded, are more at risk of being exploited in all sorts of, and preyed upon by all sorts of criminals. So I'm just wondering, how does that fit into the Luton 2040 vision if we're cutting, funds for these kind of provisions, alternative provisions, but at the same time, these are vulnerable people that need more help and support. How are we making sure we're engaging with those? Because at the moment, I get going into mainstream schools is important. I completely understand that and I'm supportive of that. But it's the young people that are excluded the most that we're kind of more likely missing out on. And especially with these cuts that have just been made, what's going to happen there?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting and multifaceted answer to this, and so I'll give you a couple of things what's going on. I mean, you know that we have a new service director for education called Paul Wagstaff, who's got some phenomenal ideas around task force and kind of inclusion. Luton's had a social inclusion policy in place in terms of schools for a long time, yet we're still seeing children excluded from school. And of course, as we know, to put it simply, children that are excluded from school are that much more vulnerable to being drawn into exploitation. As a service, we're running the pilot supported transition for 3 years. We discussed this we discussed it at some length actually at the last time, where we took the first cohort in September 2022. And we took the young people who were most likely to struggle in terms of making that transition. And they're the group with the factors that demonstrate that they're the ones that, when they make that transition, they're more than likely to be excluded within 6 months. And a number of other factors around social care referrals, entry into criminal justice system. We've currently got the university evaluate that first cohort, because we've closed that first cohort now. We've worked with them up until February of this year. And the signs are really, really good. And that evaluation is going to demonstrate, actually, I mean, it doesn't demonstrate cost saving. What it does is it demonstrates a cost avoidance that if you work intensively with these young people, and it wasn't, by today's standard, it wasn't expensive working intensively with those young people and their parents. So one of the initiatives that we're looking on from beyond there is something with Adrian's colleagues to create something or resurrect something called the Amber Unit, but to create a first response to schools that is a mixture of police officers, warranted police officers, and targeted youth workers. So the things that schools would normally report to the police 101 doesn't replace 99, of course, in an emergency 99 still exists. But the idea would be to go out and offer that school a pathway to take that young person out, to give them some specialist intervention and then reintegrate them back to school. That gives the head teacher the justification that they need for the rest of the parents, but it also keeps that child in the school. We can maintain that, boundaries around that young people and get them back in. So we've got some initiatives, and like I say, these are just two of a number of things that are going across schools in terms of young people. But if we can maintain education and that framework and that resilience for young people, then we should see less young people being drawn into criminal exploitation and offending.
Thank you, Chair. I want to say well done to David, at least for what you do at your agency. It's one of the best in the country, I must say. Put Luton in the map as one of the reduced reoffending rates for our youth. So one thing I've read the report, and one thing I've seen is the early intervention, which you've mentioned consecutively, especially with partnering local agencies. I want to marry that with some of the programs we had last year after that knife incident. Was this information not being shared across? I don't know if there's a new way you want to make sure you get access to this information and act on it, not just gathering the information and probably not being used for anything.
So, actually, we're quite far down the line with that with our police colleagues. I mean, we developed MAGPAN, Multi-Agency Gangs Panel, in 2016. And, bear in mind, we're only talking 8 years ago, but we weren't mapping gangs together as a council or the police. We weren't sharing intel. That was almost like a revelation to sit there with, intelligence analysts from the police and start putting together the information that we knew about young people to where we are today. So as a service today, bearing in mind that, we've only got 5 targeted youth workers, we've got 8 youth justice officers. So we've got very, very finite resources. Each morning we get at 8:30, we get a list of young people who have been victims and perpetrators of crime in the previous 24 hours. As a service, we have a business meeting at 9:15, but we've already done searches on all those young people. So we know which ones are involved in the MAP gangs, we know which ones are open to our statutory youth justice, target youth, edge of care, all our services. We'll have that discussion. What's going on? For example, this morning there was 2 incidents near a school. Of a similar nature. So do we need to go and speak to that school? Do we need to go and speak to that school to see if they're aware of it? Are they aware of what's going on? Do we need to deploy our detached there? Because remember, our detached youth work now has all of the local community organisations that we fund as part of that. So we just don't have one detached youth worker going into Biscuit or Dallow. We have 3 community organisations along with that targeted youth worker. Because that's what came out of Dallow Cares, this idea that these are our children in our communities. So following on from that business meeting we have, so we will then meet with our MASH colleagues, our multi-agency safeguarding hub colleagues at 9:45. This is every day, it's Monday to Friday every day. And we will discuss what needs to happen that day. Responses to that could be, we might need a complex strategy meeting where we're talking about a dozen children over in Marsh Farm, to then have that multi-agency, multi-partnership response to it. So in terms of information, it gets shared, where our seconded police officer will complete those multi-agency intel forms on a daily basis and send them into police intel. So as a partnership, we're pretty good.
this, I was just saying it's probably worth noting that actually some of that mapping activity extends beyond Bedfordshire and will feed into other local authorities that are doing similar activities in terms of their young people. So there is that cross-borough working and partnership that happens across the piece.
And I mean, just to add to that, at any one time, 10% of our caseload in Luton of young people is London children who are affiliated with gangs placed in our area.
Just wanted to ask two things. So when you're saying that the schools are going to play a more significant role, how are they going to be funded, or is that going to have to come out of their own budget? Because again, schools are already having difficulties with their own budgets, staffing and so on. Second question, before I forget, is, and I bet you've already forgotten it.
Yeah.
If you answer the first.
Yeah, no. That's yeah. You're absolutely right, and it's part of the work we're doing with this pilot, councillor, because the reality is that anything prevention, particularly when it's really specialist, and particularly against the backdrop of what we've been facing financially nationally, let alone in Luton, you have to demonstrate that something, it has some worth in terms of cost avoidance. I learnt this with Edge of Care when we developed Edge of Care in 2020, slap bang in the middle of the COVID lockdown. So by the time I got to putting this supported transitions together, and it has to be said, this 3-year pilot of supported transitions is being funded through the Youth Justice Contingency Fund. So it's not even Luton Borough Council money at this stage. But each of the evaluation outcomes are measured against something that costs money. So entry to the criminal justice system, I can put a cost on it. Social care referral, we can put a cost on that. We can put a cost on the assessment, exclusion from school, alternative learning provisions. So the evaluation is shameless. Yeah, these children, they're not being excluded from school. Their attendance is going up. So there's some good qualitative stuff there. But it's also about, but this is what it's saving colleagues. This is what it's saving this, and this is what it's saving that. I can't answer the question as to where it's going to come from because I don't know what the model looks like. If I was forced into an answer today, I would say it would have to become a traded service, which means that if a school identifies that a young person needs that particular level of need, then they can buy that in from this service. But that's only one of the options. But I don't have. Hopefully, this time next year, I'll have the answer to that.
The last thing I wanted to ask is, we've looked through this report and it looks very similar, if not the same, to what we had previously. I still don't have anything in here that says, there's things that how we'll measure, how we will do this, but I don't see where it says we will do this and this is exactly how it's going to happen. So when can we expect something a little bit more concrete in terms of exactly the processes of how you're going to put these things in place?
With respect, councillor, I think it's completely different to the last theme because my theme for the community safety partnership up to now has been the 3 statutory performance indicators that youth justice have. We're no longer a youth justice service. Youth justice, when I started reporting to the community safety partnership, we had over 1,500 children in our statutory youth justice system. We had, over 100 children going to custody each year. We have a fraction of that now because of the specialist intervention that we've created around it, simply to meet the fast changing contextual needs of our children. What you have now is a complete change. Let me explain. If you look at the 4 incidents, knife incidents in September last year, 10 young people got remanded in custody. Of those 10 young people, 100% of them were excluded from school. Okay. Only one of them had ever been convicted of an offence before, and that was a low-level offence. All of them had multiple referrals to social care. Okay, but what you've got 10 young people now that are, 6 of who are charged with murder, with no previous issues as such. So the concern is this: they're all known to MAGPAN, though. The place where we hold a huge amount of risk in a voluntary space. So my challenge is, where's the eyes on these children? Where's the school's eyes? Where's the community eyes? Where's the services eyes? So you can't tell me that these children just decided to pick up knives and go out and do this. So what I'm reporting is actually a whole body of work that goes on, because one of those things that says numbers of children in MAGPAN that aren't previously known says a lot about all of the service working.
Thank you for that, David. If there was a link between being excluded or expelled and getting into crime, should we not be targeting those children? Should we not be looking at the schools? Because we would have the data as a local authority that which school is excluding which children, and should we not be doing stuff with them and adding that to this plan as well as MAGPAN?
Yeah, absolutely. And several things. I mean, one, obviously, talking about the work of Paul Wagstaff and his service in relation to the task force is just that. The Pathfinder pilot that Luton has been successful in £2 million. Families First will be about working with young people in that space. But I would go back to supported transitions. So the pilot that we have running is based on the analytics that those children are likely to be drawn into this. And how do we know that? Because every 15, 16, 17-year-old that comes into care at 17, goes into prison, gets involved in knife crime, have 15 key factors around them, exclusion being one of them, alternative learning provisions being one of them. So some of the work we're doing at the moment and we're still at the proposal stage with Beds Uni and the LND as a university hospital, is an early screening tool to apply this to all year sixes going into year sevens, because that's the critical transition when they go up to secondary school. So lots.
I mean, just picking up what my colleague up there said earlier on, if we're cutting funding to alternative provision, surely we're increasing the risk rather than reducing it. So as well as what you're doing, I think we need to kind of look at alternative provision. If these children are being excluded from school and we're cutting funding to AP, what are they going to do? They're going to be at home, be back on the street, and we're actually increasing that risk. So I think we need to look at it again. Street sexual exploitation, domestic abuse in particular. Any questions or issues surrounding that area, please? Well, let's start off. What are the trends that we've got at the moment in terms of domestic abuse within our community?
Hello, Chair. Nicola Ainsworth, Public Health Consultant. The reports that we give to CSP on a quarterly basis show that the incidence of domestic abuse is slightly going down in Luton.
Is there any reason behind it? Can we make an assumption that this is something that's going to continue? Is there any increased risk, do you believe, in terms of domestic abuse?
In terms of what the future trends will be, that's always hard to predict. I'm not sure what else to say about future trends. Sally, do you have any?
So we're just undertaking a new needs assessment, so we'll have a better oversight of the data following that. But the trends are looking like they're going down. We continue to look at hotspots, and they haven't changed either considerably over the last period. So the needs assessment will lead to a refresh of the strategy, which will lead to ongoing focus. So we would hope that that trend would continue, but obviously it's a challenge to predict that definitely. The risk, I would say, on domestic abuse is that currently a lot of the work is funded through the domestic abuse grant, which is ring fenced, and we're in the final year of that. So there is a potential risk around the sustainability of some of the work. We're just doing a review of that and looking at options and risks against that. But aside from that, we are continuing with the work, completing the new needs assessment and refreshing the strategy aims and actions within that. So the work is continuing, and hopefully there will be some ongoing sustainability beyond this year.
My colleague here has just whispered in my ear, is this in any way affected by the fact that people are not reporting it? It's going back to the same thing that we've said previously about reporting of crime by the public, that they feel that nothing happens, so therefore they don't report it. Is that the case here? And are there any differences, because we're such a multicultural society, are there any differences between different parts of the town?
In terms of the first point about, is it people not reporting, that's always a danger with this type of issue. And I think within the strategy that we're going to refresh, we might well have more of a focus on tackling stigma and trying to address that and trying to encourage people to report more. So if that happens, then we may see figures go up in the future. In terms of what we know about different parts of the town, we have the hotspot maps, as Sally pointed out, and we know that I think it's central is one of our key areas where this is happening. So we know there are differences across the town geographically. We don't know any further breakdown beyond that, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Chair. How much, with the fall in numbers on domestic violence, how does that compare to pre-COVID days? Because I know there was a huge upturn in COVID, so I'm assuming people getting back to normal, going out, that would cause a downward trend?
Very possibly. Could I just add something about the on-street sexual exploitation part, because that's a new part that's coming, that's part of the community safety plan. It is an issue that's been around for us in Luton for a long time. I've only been with the council for 1.5 years, but I'm aware that it's something that we've had a strategy on before and tackled before, and now it's come back. And today we've just managed to finalise a version that can go to the next community safety partnership meeting of a new strategy and action plan, which has got over 60 actions in it to address this really important area, because it is a real problem in the High Town area.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to make a contribution here, that there's a lot of work that's going on at the moment with the perpetrators as well, with the Ibonista project, and another project that's been commissioned by the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner called the Chrysalis Hub. So that's doing very, very well. So that's all contributing, that for the perpetrators as well, they're working with them, and it's really been taken up as well. So I just thought I'll add that up as well.
Questions relating to that area? Yes, Councillor.
A few questions, if I could. Could I please find out, if we know, what the total budget is that's available to CGL and others that are involved, like Key Stage Housing, Hightown, that are involved in? So what resources are available at the moment? And there's a reason for me asking that question.
So the core funding for the drug and alcohol services is through the public health grant. It's one of the statutory services that's funded through the public health grant. And the total budget for that is about 3.5 million. We also then got the substance misuse grant, National 10-Year Drug Strategy funding, which is an addition. A condition of that is that we then don't reduce the core services, so it can't go into the core services, and then we release that funding and fund something else. So overall, I haven't got the total figure for both of those combined off the top of my head, but I can come back on that.
I've got it if you want to. In a minute.
Yeah. the funding, again, similarly as to the risk for the domestic abuse, the funding for the new drug strategy, we're in the last year of agreed funding for that, awaiting more information from national government on that. But at the moment, the new 10-year drug strategy funding is in its final year. And then that's just for the public health bits. The police will obviously get some additional funding for drugs work also.
So if you would like the exact figures, do you want that?
No, I wanted a rough figure. But part of the reason I was asking is if we actually send clients away for rehabilitation, for example, that's going to be normally for about 4 or 6 weeks. So it's quite a chunk of money. So I'm trying to get an idea. I know there's lots of different parts of the service, but for that part in particular, I'm wondering how much it also costs also to do the rehabilitation, which I think normally would be for about 4 weeks up to 6 weeks.
So the rehab funding is slightly different. So there was some additional funding through the drug strategy money for additional rehab places, fast track. And then there's some shared funding for rehab between ourselves and adult social care for additional places within rehab. So that's separate. That's a separate pot, but it's quite a small proportion of the bigger amount that I was saying previously.
Okay.
We would, as we recommission the service, we're going into a tender period to recommission the service for April next year. We will look at building that into a more robust approach and shared funding, but at the moment that's where we're looking at.
The other thing I wanted to pick up, because it didn't really come across, I'm asking questions because I know quite a lot of people that work in this general area. It's no wrong door approach for services. Now, you and I know that if somebody goes to for mental health treatment, one of the things that the psychiatrist might say, if there's somebody who suffers from a dual diagnosis, you need to go and get yourself sorted out. And vice versa, if somebody goes to get themselves sorted out for drug addiction, how do the drug services, drug and alcohol services, find the place for them so I think we're overstating the issue here about the wrong door approach, because it's not a simplistic situation where you might put that thing down, might put those words down in fact, but in the reality, there's a lot of learning to be done on both sides and a lot of joined up work to take place for that really to be working.
So historically, that has been a challenge. Yes, I agree. And you hear that a lot through service users, that they bounce back between mental health and drug and alcohol services. There has been a lot of work in that space, and we would hope that it's in a much better place. And the mental health provider ELFT and the drug and alcohol provider CGL are working really collaboratively together to try and make that not the case anymore. You do still hear that anecdotally though through service users. So we are trying to work on that, and there's a whole dual diagnosis pathway and partnership working. So we're hoping that won't be a problem going forward, but we do still hear about it.
It was good to see that that there's a suggestion that the administration of sorry if I can pronounce it right, naloxone is going to be given out to police as well. As I understand it, it's quite often given out to drug addicts themselves, so that they can actually inject somebody if it comes across. Because one of the issues, as I understand it's happening nowadays, somebody could be on crack cocaine, but it may end up by being mixed with heroin, and they don't know that, and they could become addicted. And somebody suddenly becoming addicted to that would be a need if they suddenly pass out to have naloxone administered to them. And I'm wondering whether we should go beyond just going out for training to police, and perhaps we should get families that have somebody that has a drug addiction in the family, if we also should be actually giving it out, if we're not giving it out to members of the family. Because what we do not want is somebody, even unwittingly, becoming an addict. And it does happen. And I've seen statistics to know that it happens, because there's a lot of mixing up nowadays of drugs that people are taking. So I don't know what your views would be on that.
So I'll have to take away some thinking about the family element. So as part of the National Drug Strategy, naloxone has gone out. The part of the drive behind within the strategy is to put naloxone out into more frontline frontline staff. So they're trained. So there's a training element as well, and there's appropriateness of when it's used and how to administer it, and so they don't cause harm to themselves. And there's all a whole piece around that. So there's much more naloxone in frontline policing and in other services such as prisons, etc. I don't know about families and how safe that would be, but I can take it away and have a look at that. I don't know if police colleagues want to come in at all on that.
It will be a very brief response from me. I got asked the question 2 days ago. I said I wanted every one of my team trained so that because they're the ones who come into contact with the people who are going to need it. This is a life-saving piece of equipment. And so every community officer will be trained and a lot of police officers.
I was pleased to see it, but I'm wondering whether it should be extended further. It was really the background to my question into other groups.
Beyond my knowledge of it's, as my colleague says, it's something we can take away and look at. It's not something I've heard of anywhere else.
The last area that I wanted to cover, if I could, what we have seen, not just in Luton, not just in Bedfordshire, but we've seen disruption in the delivery of mental health services. You know, we've seen, for example, different authorities being in charge of our mental health services. That's caused some disruption because it's caused major changes. So 2 questions I wanted to ask. Number one is, how many beds do we have in Luton for mental health services? That's the first one. And secondly, do people really know, family members and other members of the general public, do they really know how to access mental health support? Because I don't think that happens. I'm sure if I asked each member of councillors here, if they knew how they needed to access mental health services for a loved one, I bet they wouldn't know how to do it. It's not an easy task.
No, and mental health service provision is complicated, and I think that can be a bit of a barrier for people when they need to access it. In answer to your first question, my answer is I don't actually know how many beds there are in Luton, but I can find out. But I know, again, it's a national drive to increase the numbers of beds and the numbers of beds that are closer to where people live, so they're not going, hundreds of miles away. So I can take that away and find out. I'll link to our borough lead for our Elft mental health services. In answer to the second question, we have a new mental health strategy, and one of the pillars of that is around access and improving access, and again trying to get to this no wrong door approach. So it's more streamlined because there are different elements of mental health services that are relevant to different people, but trying to break down those pathway barriers and make sure people don't fall through the net. So part of that promotion of how people access them and when and what the number is, etc., is part of that work.
Nancy, you were trying to get in? No, can we?
Just wanted to make sure, Okay, so my question was around mental health, and it was around the referral services for the assessment. I know currently there's a long waiting time just to get an assessment in, because I remember speaking to a resident and they said they'd been to a GP, and the GP said they'll get about a year if they're lucky just to get someone to speak to them, just to get an assessment. Also, I was wondering how we're going to be working around that module to get the adults help, because I know we're working with young adults and children, but the adults and the older adults are getting a bit neglected here.
Again, with our new mental health strategy, that whole access piece is one of the strands with some actions that are coming out of that. So it will be brought in as part of that. The detail of those actions we're just working through. We had some workshops where we're trying to get partners together and sort of hone down what the actions are rather than just the ambition. So we will bring that through once it's finalised to CSP, and we can bring it back through the next iteration here as well.
Just moving on then to town centre safety.
Yeah, just wanted to come back on your point there. I've actually found Luton services for mental health actually to be very, very good. I know I won't go into any details, but certainly I know of people that have had to access it. Total Wellbeing in Luton is very, very good, and they had treatment within 8 weeks, and that's a very recent situation. So I do think Luton is probably one of the better ones, having been associated with it for some number of years now, not personally, but through people I know. Thank you.
No, I just I take it what Jill has said, but I think that isn't necessarily that's not necessarily the experience of many people. And I'm not saying that Luton is not better off in many parts of the country, but obviously what we're trying to look after here is our residents and to make sure that they have the best service. Because I repeat, I do not really believe at the moment, maybe the new strategy will help, that people know how to make, especially for adults, people know how to access the service for their family members.
Okay, I'll move on to town centre safety.
Sorry, Chair. Just wanted to make a comment and hopefully you'll kind of answer everybody's things. Is it possible where we can get something, a report or something specifically on mental health? Because mental health itself is quite a big area. It does touch on to sort of alcohol and drug misuse, because there are mentally ill patients who kind of do take drugs and then relapse kind of thing. And also when it comes to getting help in terms of crisis prevention and all of that, things have changed since the last few years and things are continually changing. So it'd be probably better if we had one report that kind of addressed some of those things.
Can I just say that what you've just mentioned, yes, perfectly valid, but that should not be something that comes to OSB. It should go to the health social care scrutiny rather than to here, I think. But I think if we can make a note of it, Eunice, and we'll put it through to the chair of that committee. But we will pick it up and see if we can get it on. No, understand. It's just that if we're not careful, we bring everything back to one committee and it won't work. Okay. Just on the town centre one, we've already had some discussions. I'd just like to say that most of us are aware that Newton Borough Council went through a peer review process, which was very much in depth. One of the main items raised by the peers in the peer review was town centre safety. And they even went so far as to say that they themselves, as visiting peers from other councils, didn't feel safe walking through the town centre. Do we have any views or questions about that?
Can I just ask what their reasons were? Because being a born and bred Lutonian, I can walk around through my town and I have no issues or being scared to walk. So what was their reason as to why they felt scared to walk around the town centre?
That was what their report said, and their report's available. Yes.
Yeah, just to chip in, if that's okay. So I think having met with the police today and gone through some of the stats around town centre as well, I think the actual reality, okay, you can talk about reporting and so on, but there's lots of stats that would suggest that the town centre is moving in a good direction in certain elements. But I think on the report itself, actually just reading through it again, that the element actually we've presented back is probably a bit more we can add into that, looking at it, because there's actually loads going on in the town centre in terms of the police's agenda, the multi-agency approach. Obviously, we've got a town centre working group. So I think we're probably undersold the activity that's happening in the town centre somewhat. So I think we perhaps just need a little revisit. I mean, you've heard some of it today, Chair, but I think what the police and council discussed earlier today, meeting with the Chief Constable, was that actually we've still got a big issue around perception of the town centre. And I think their experience was their experience, the peer reviewers who come to the town, but I think there is a bit of a legacy hangover as well around the perception of the town. So, I mean, I walk through it every day. I see it with my own eyes. I've lived or worked in Luton all my life, and I can get a sense of, you know, the ups and downs of it all. But I think there is still a bit of a myth-busting exercise we need to go through with some of the elements of the town hall, town centre crime and ASB. So just to put that into play, thanks. Cheers.
I tend to agree with Adam there. I think it might. Do you know what the evidence was about why they felt unsafe, or was it just a perception thing? Because I feel walking around town, being a Lutonian, having been brought up here, I feel quite safe walking around town. I just would like to know what the evidence base was.
I'm afraid I can't explain it all. Yes.
Yeah, Gemma Odefield from Community Safety. I think from memory, when that peer mentioned it, he was speaking in reference of a certain underpass that just made him feel a bit uneasy. But then he compared the feeling of safety in Bury Park and said they felt really safe in Bury Park. So yeah, there's work to do in Luton. And James, your team has been doing consultation for the renewal of the PSPO recently, haven't they? And we've heard from people that don't feel safe because of the begging. That's what people first see when they come to Luton. So we're working on that. We know there's a lot of work to do in Luton. I think it is more so the perception. And it's funny that Adam, you say that you feel safe walking through town, because I've lived and worked in Luton all my life as well, and I don't feel as safe as a woman, and I think that's something that we have to tackle as well. So yeah, there's work to do, but we're on it. The town centre safety is a new theme, a standalone theme in this plan. So I'm hoping that quite quickly we'll be able to see some positive changes in the town centre.
Right. What other areas do this committee wish to raise with the officers now this evening?
Antisocial behaviour is an issue I'd like some information on. Barnfield Ward has Luton Sixth Form College with 3,200 students. It has Barnfield College with 2,000 students. They're both in residential areas. Talk to the people who live near the colleges and ask them what issues they have. Is it violent? No. Violent activity is very rare. So what is the problem? I'll tell you what it is. It's litter. That is the issue that everybody will mention to you if you ask them what are the problems around those colleges. And the council has an absurd policy of refusing to issue fixed penalty notices to these students. So 2 questions. Whose idea was this stupid policy, and what is the logic behind it? The third question is, if they won't issue fixed penalty notices to the students, what are they going to do about it?
So good evening. My name is James Hardiman. I'm one of the neighbourhood operations managers. So the question that the councillor has just mentioned there is twofold. So when we look at those involved in education establishments, as we've already talked about tonight, they are generally those that are going through that youth provision. As we all know, our fixed penalty notices for littering have been raised to their maximum amount of £500. And for those individuals that are going to those youth provisions, a £500 fixed penalty notice is a hefty amount. We need to base that against the responsibilities of the parents, and we could be putting those young people at greater risk of exploitation to try and pay fixed penalty notices. Not to mention, if they don't pay, then criminalising them and putting them in the criminal justice system. There is some work ongoing and some work being trialled through the ASB action plan that was brought in for remedies for lower level offences such as graffiti and littering. And that's being trialled by a number of authorities at the moment. So as I say, with regards to some of the patrols that have been carried out, the offences need to be witnessed there and then at the time. And as I say, patrols have been carried out in relation to that, and no offences witnessed. And as I say, we can take some of that work back and we can do some social value, which has been done by WISE around a number of our educational establishments, and then look further in terms of what we can do around some of those education establishments.
So no answers as to what the council's going to do about it then. So I take it that the council is content that the residents around those areas have a choice. They can either live knee deep in other people's litter, or they can pick it up themselves, which is what they're doing at the moment. Not a satisfactory answer, Chair. The council needs to pick this up and deal with it.
Whose responsibility? Responsibility of enforcement or responsibility? Yes.
I'm just going to come back to Councillor Franks. I mean, I think criminalising young people and spoiling their life chances is not the way forward. I think what our neighbourhood team is, I think there's a need to work with the institutions. There's a need to educate them, work with the colleges, and try to get through about saving the environment. I think this is a broader piece of work that needs to be done, and maybe it's something that could be reflected in the plan. But going around and criminalising people and charging them £500 is not the answer. And I'm sure I wouldn't want that for young people in Luton, to criminalise them over dropping litter. But I understand the issue, and I think it's about educating and working through the colleges.
Councillor, you asked to come in.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly make a comment. I mean, I've been up and down where Luton Sixth Form is because my daughter's a current student, and I've never ever seen any issues with littering. If anything, I'm surprised that you haven't said anything about parking, which is more of an issue, to be fair, because students finish at different times. I do see people when they pick up their children block off other people's sort of driveways when they shouldn't be, which makes it quite difficult for people to pass and park up and so on. But when it comes to littering, there hasn't been much of an issue that I've seen, that I've observed, because I'm pretty much there every day. But what I could suggest, I suppose, is if we can put a few extra bins around the colleges, perhaps, because there is a shop right near the Sixth Form College where a lot of students tend to go and congregate, have some food. So maybe put a bin up there and put one right near the college. That might be a better answer than giving them fines.
And Chair, more than happy to take that away.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not even sure where we jumped from. Town centre safety, just to know whether we are in what's it called, number 6, which is the environmental crime ASB. But quickly, I will say it's shocking what's coming up from the other bench. What Councillor Frank is suggesting about children in schools. It's horrendous. I think we should work a better way to make this problem go away. I'll be planning to talk to the school, talk to the children. More litter bins. These are the things I think you should be professing, and not issuing fines to children or criminalizing them. It's shocking.
So Franks,
I just want to come back on this litter issue again. There are 7 litter bins in Bradgers Hill Road near the Sixth Form College. They are emptied several times a week, and when they are emptied, they are mostly not overflowing, but fairly full. What that tells me is the overwhelming majority of those students actually use the bins. So the problem is a very small number of students. I mean, my guess, because I live near the college and I walk around it area quite a lot, my guess is that out of the 3,200 students, the real problem is probably somewhere between 25 and 30 people. And if you're telling me that you don't want to criminalise them, then don't criminalise them. Give them a £500 fixed penalty notice, which is reduced to 75 if paid within a fairly short time. And one of the things that will do will be to alert their parents to how their youngsters are behaving. And I think that's one of the routes to deal with it.
I'm just shocked what my colleagues across the floor are saying. I mean, so the Lib Dems are all about criminalising young children because they drop some litter, and you're into basically destroying their life chances. So I'm just horrified of what you're saying.
That is all of the group for necessarily, and I think that you need to take that back.
We have already had one councillor found to have broken the code of conduct by telling lies in this council chamber this week. Do we want another one?
Councillor Frank, I assumed as leader of the Lib Dems you're talking on behalf of your party. If you're not, if that's your personal view, that's your personal view. But I am surprised you're saying that. And I think educating people, working with the colleges, I don't know if you've gone and talked to the colleges, there's a small minority, there's a case of working with the colleges rather than going around issuing fines.
Marek, can you come in, please?
I'm not sure if this is working. Good. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, just to come in, I think to pick up on Councillor Frank's concern, there's a bit of join up we can be doing here around the War on Waste campaign, which colleagues will be aware of. A very proactive approach from the council to tackle persistent littering, but also talk with our communities around community responsibility. I think the join up is with our educational establishments, and if it isn't already in the plan, I suspect it is, but let's have a talk with the service director, the theme lead, Vicky Hawkes, about that, and with our service directors in education about how we can join up the work with our schools. And we'll start, I think, with the sixth form college and the colleges in the area that you've highlighted, Councillor Franks, to try and see how that campaign can land in a positive way with young people. Because when young people take responsibility, as you say, for a small number of offenders within their own community, we're much more likely to get results than criminalisation, I would suggest.
Yeah, my view, based on what we've just had as an exchange, is that we need to make sure that we're staying with this being totally non-political, because I don't believe that this is a political issue.
First, I should probably declare an interest. I'm a governor at Luton Sixth Form College, so I'll make that clear. Secondly, in a town where we've got 4 in 10 young people growing up in poverty, I am astounded that you think the way to move forward is to find young people already struggling financially.
Yes, Councillor.
Just to change the topic, Chair, if I may. I want to congratulate the officers for trying innovative schemes to try to deal with some of the litter problems and other problems in the town. As you know, we have a SAP trial that's taking place, which the council decided should take place. It seems to be something that's working, and I think it's incumbent on all of us as councillors and elected representatives, whether it's an MP or a councillor, should get behind the new schemes to see if they will work and see if they can go forward. It was very unfortunate that one member of the Tory group decided to go to the press and appeared to rubbish the scheme. And I don't think that's the way that we should go away. If the council tries innovative schemes, we should support them, and to see if it works. If it doesn't work, then we change. But if it does work, it's a good thing. And I think that perhaps looking at innovation again, perhaps we could look at going around some of the wards, picking up dumped, maybe on a 1 day a week, picking up dumped items rather than waiting for residents to have to get back to officers. That would be a wonderful innovation in the wards if we could try that as well. Wholeheartedly support the council for their innovation, and it's about time that we said some positive things about what our officers are doing. So my thanks.
Can I just bring this back a bit more closely to subject? Are there further questions that we would like to put to officers concerning the actions and work of the Scrutiny Board for Crime and Disorder? Because I think we've slightly gone off topic. Any further questions? In which case, if we don't have any further questions, I'm going to say we stop for this one for this evening. I'd like to thank the officers for attending. I'd like to thank you for coming back for a second round. I know it's not the normal practice, but we appreciate the fact that you have. And thank you to our new police crime commissioner. Thank you.